Hey, Steel City Nation. My guest today is Ethan Cadeaux. He is a University of Maryland graduate who works for NBC Sports Washington. He's a writer slash digital sports media content specialist. How you doing today, Ethan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Living the dream. I love doing my podcast, and I'm glad
Thanks
to
for
have you as
having
a
me
guest.
on. Appreciate it. It's
Um,
full circle for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for a little bit of information out there, I had Ethan probably 8 or 10 years ago in school when I was when he was in school, and I had him as a
Yeah.
student in my health class. Um, so it's kind of fun to talk to him now as he's a grown man out in the real world,
Crazy
pretty
to
much
think
living his
about.
dream.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how long it's been, but it doesn't feel that long. So,
No, no. I'm going to get right into it with you, bud.
yes,
What
sir.
sparked your interest in wanting to report on sports?
So this story I always love explaining. So growing up, like career days in elementary school, like early middle school, I just always wanted to be like every boy, like a professional, like football, basketball, baseball player, whatever sport I was playing. And then I quickly realized in middle school that there was just no chance of this happening at all.
Right.
But I had such a strong passion for sports. I knew the way I wanted to make money and the career I wanted to enter had to do with sports. And I always really liked English, writing, like I would watch Sports Center in the morning. I wouldn't watch cartoons. I was always really into sports media. So entering high school, I really wanted to focus on that. I joined the student newspaper, I think my sophomore and my junior year, and then got to cover like the football team, worked for mocofootball.com and a couple other local outlets. And by the time I got to Maryland, like I picked Maryland because not just because it was my state school. The short like story of that is I didn't want to go to Maryland. I didn't want to go to my state school. But when I saw the sports journalism program they had there with George Solomon and the Shirley Povich Center and all the internship opportunities that they had in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, I thought I could live or grow up anywhere, but
Yeah.
Maryland's the school I want to attend. So that's how I ended up in Maryland. And from there, just took off to where I am now.
Um, at Maryland, was there any particular sport you like covering better than the others?
I mean, the simple answer is men's basketball, just because it was the best team there. So I actually got lucky. My freshman year, like the first semester I was there, the news director of WMUC Sports, the radio station there, was my tour guide when I was a high school student.
Oh, wow.
Touring around. So she actually helped convince me to come to Maryland. And I emailed her, went to like the interest meeting, like my first week on campus. And she had enough confidence in me to send me to Maryland football's like midweek football press conferences, which happened every Tuesday, like in the Tizer Tower at Maryland Stadium. So my third week of class as a freshman, I was 18, just turned 18. I'm sitting next to a bunch of reporters talking to then Randy Edsall. And once Randy Edsall got fired that year, it happened to be Mike Loxley, who now is the head coach after a 3-year gap, I guess. So covering the midweek press conferences was honestly something that still stands out to me, because that's where I got to communicate and like network with other local people that cover Maryland sports. So for me, like freshman and sophomore year, I was really into covering Maryland sports. But then my junior year, or through my first semester junior year, and then my second semester junior year, I studied abroad in Rome, and I got to write for this magazine called Wanted in Rome. There, it wasn't really like a big thing. It was just one of my classes, but got to cover some soccer there as well. And then senior year is when I got my internship with NBC Sports Washington, and I never let them kick me out, so I'm still there today.
I don't blame you. That sounds like an awesome. That sounds like an awesome journey. I mean, going to Rome and covering sports there, that's a whole nother realm.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very, very minor. I mean, I just signed up for one of the journalism classes there. I actually didn't even get credit for it, but we got to like cover non-sports events. It was an English magazine through our university, but it wasn't only sports. So I got to write a bunch of other stuff too. It was a lot of fun.
It's funny you say that because I watched this thing on Netflix the other day, and I don't know if you've seen it or if you have Netflix, but it's called Home Team. And
Hmm.
there's a sport they play right up the road in Florence. It's called Calico Storico.
Never
It,
heard of it.
it's an awesome thing. In fact, I'm going to do a podcast about it. That's how awesome it is. But it's
Hmm.
about four different teams that play this sport around Florence, and it's a combination of rugby and UFC.
Oh,
Like these
whoa.
dudes beat the daylights out of each other to score,
Yeah.
and it was just really fun to watch it. I recommend it. It's called Home Team, and it's on Netflix. But like I said, I'm going to do a podcast on it. It's that
Yeah.
in depth.
I definitely got to check that out. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was in Europe, I wasn't a big soccer fan until I got there. And then I went to a Champions League game between Liverpool and Roma. And I tell people this to this day, there's not one sporting atmosphere in the United States that I've been to that even comes close to matching the atmosphere that was in Stadio Olimpico for that Champions League semifinal game. Like I walked in and it was like a first come first serve with seats. People did not care what your ticket said, where your row was. It was find any room you can stand. People waved the flags the entire time. There's cheering the entire time. I didn't sit down once. There's literally bulletproof glass in between the Roma section and the visitor section because
Wow.
it gets so like rowdy in there. Like it was ridiculous. I mean, Roma won the game but lost like the aggregate match, but it was still like I think back about that day and I'm like, they're really doing it right over here. Like in America, it's just no sporting event, not even like crazy NFL games. I feel like match the passion of those supporters over there.
In some ways, in America, we've taken sports and we're using it now for different angles,
Definitely.
and that's being very gentle about it. And I'm not going to get into it real in depth,
Hmm.
but I feel like in the other countries where they play other sports, that's not their thing. It's just the sport. They're there
Yeah,
for the sport. You know,
definitely.
who's your favorite sports writer, and did that person or people
Hmm.
impact you?
So I have a few. Growing up, I used to always read like John Feinstein, and of course, like by the time I really got into it, both Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, most of their work was done on PTI, pardon the interruption, rather than writing. But I read Feinstein a lot, but now I read a lot of the Washington Post columnists,
Okay.
like Barry Serluga and Jerry Brewer. I both think are really good. So for me at this point in my career, I read everyone at my station, of course. And there's two people I work with, JP Finley and Pete Haley, who I single-handedly look at their work as a way for me to try and get better. But I think for me, in order to develop as good of a writer as I can possibly be, I have to read outside of the people I work with, where I can't attach the personality and my personal relationship with them to looking at their writing. So that's why I like to read other people at the Washington Post because generally they're writing about the same topics I am and we are, but I like to see how they approach it to see how it can better myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You get a different angle on the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. It's just like teaching. You can have the same you can have the same class with three different teachers, and we all deliver it differently. And you may learn more from one writer than you learn from the other two. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to high school. Let's go back to Northwest. What do you wish you would have done maybe a little differently to help yourself with your career?
Hmm.
Is there anything you could have done different there?
That's tough because I feel like I got into it kind of early. A lot of people, when they arrived to Maryland, just didn't have that much experience. Honestly, I might even go the opposite way. I would say maybe I wish I, as a senior, like maybe I spent a couple games in the stands and really got to enjoy it as a student. And like, because those are my friends on the field. Like
Yeah.
senior year, I have a personal relationship with players in the team. Like two of the middle linebackers on the team that won states my senior year, I'm literally texting them. Like we're still really good friends. So I think maybe that was something maybe just like taking a step back, but I'm not going to say I regret it because that experience I had in high school helped give me a leg up when I got to Maryland. I would say maybe the only other thing is in high school, maybe taking the chance to cover a sporting event that wasn't Northwest, or maybe going to a QO or a Wooten game and writing about that, trying to like do a story on the team that maybe I don't have those personal relationships. Because nowadays, like in the Redskins locker room, yeah, it's easy. You can go up to a player and talk, but you'll get turned down a lot. But my friends, like after Northwest games, I would talk to them. It'd be completely professional.
Sure.
But after that, we're texting like, do you want to hang out afterwards? And that's just not really – like that's not a real thing in the sports world now. Like I'm not going to hang out with any of the people I interview in the Redskins locker room afterwards like I would be in high school. So it's a little different.
You feel like they maybe in some ways look at you as a threat since you are the media?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they know my true colors and like my personal relationship with them. I wouldn't do any like – maybe this goes back to me, but like I was never going to do anything that would threaten like their status. If they like, if they said something bad about the coach, I'd probably think twice about. I would use the quote, but I'd frame it in a way to not make them look bad.
Right.
So there's definitely like covering your own high school when you're in high school. There's definitely a personal bias. It's a really thin line that you have to walk. I mean, I think I did as good a job as I could have, but I think in order for me to truly have my best sports reporting experience at a younger age, I think maybe going to a game where I didn't really know a lot of the players for a different school would have been better prepared me for when I got to Maryland.
Yeah, I can see that. I can understand how that would be. And there are a lot of good teams around, and especially when you were growing up, that you could have gone and checked out. But that's an interesting take on it. So we've talked about where you've come. Can you take us on the journey in its entirety? Because I know you got some other things that you've had going on along the way until you got to NBC Sports Washington. Yeah,
for sure. So I guess it all really started in high school. Like I said, my junior year when I started writing for mocofootball.com. Mike Cornejo, he has like his own full website. I think he does it pretty much by himself. There's that moderator board where a bunch of people from across the county chime in. But he really just gave me the platform to write full-on blog recaps of Northwest games as a junior. And that, like, I guess I got really lucky because no one entering that year thought they were going to go to states. But literally the first team I ever covered won state championship. So that was my first real experience. And then my senior year of high school, I had an internship with the Town Courier, which is the local Kentlands, Lakelands area newspaper. And they were really heavy on covering Quince Orchard community and Quince Orchard sports. And before I got there, they didn't really cover Northwest sports at all. But there's like 2 or 3 neighborhoods this paper is delivered to that their kids go to Northwest. So I had a couple friends, parents ask, like, why is the Town Courier not covering Northwest? And when I got there, they pretty much gave me the same freedoms that Moco Football did, where since it was a bi-weekly print newspaper, I would have a little more time after the game. It wasn't like I was writing on deadline, but I would get to write recaps of every Northwest game, maybe combine 1 or 2 stories together for like the print edition. So that fall I had that opportunity. So between Moco Football and the Town Courier, those were my 2 main experiences high school. I got to Maryland as a freshman in the fall of 2015, and that's when I joined WMUC Sports right away, where I got to cover those midweek football press conferences I was talking about.
Yeah.
And that winter, I actually got to cover men's basketball on a split schedule. I wasn't like the beat reporter, but we had 2 or 3 people splitting up all the home games, and for road games, we just write a recap. So I got to do that as a freshman, and then I covered baseball as well for the spring as a freshman. So my freshman year entirely, I was pretty much writing for our radio station's website. My sophomore year, I was on the executive board of the radio station. I was the assistant news director and the business director. And I pretty much did more of an editorial role my sophomore year. And then when I got to campus on my junior year, I joined the Left Bench, which is another student-run publication on campus where I got to be an editor there for a semester or 2. And then that second semester of my junior year was when I went abroad to Rome. And pretty much besides a few articles for Wanted in Rome here and there, that semester was pretty much off in terms of my career. didn't really do much that semester because I was overseas, really just trying to enjoy it all,
Yeah,
take it as a once of a lifetime experience.
a lot to enjoy there.
And then that summer, I wrote for this website called 12 Up Sports, which is just, they get a lot of traffic on their numbers, but it's really just a lot of like aggregation and posting a bunch of different like hot news, breaking news stories.
Okay.
And I actually forgot to mention my sophomore year, the fall, 2016, I actually had a digital media internship with the Washington Redskins. So I worked for the Redskins digital media department that fall. But then fast forward the next fall, my junior year was when I joined the left bench and then Rome. And then my senior year, I got an internship with NBC Sports Washington. And I interned the fall of 2018. Then that turned into a freelance role through the spring of me graduating in 2019. And then at the end of the summer last year, I was promoted to a full-time gig as my current position, a digital content producer, minor, writer. And I've been there, I guess, I've been in that building for almost 2 years because I started my internship September of 2018. But it's been 9 or so months of me in my current role there now.
My hat goes off to you because you parlayed something that you knew you wanted to do from an early age to a really, like you're getting yourself into a prominent area at such a young age where a lot of people, you're mid-20s. So a lot of people are still trying to find their way. They might even still be in college trying to find their way.
Yeah.
And you really have had a focus. I mean, I think it's spectacular that you've done that. And that's a lot of the reason I asked you to come on and just talk about how you've done that.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's definitely like one of the things growing up, my parents used to always say is if you know what you want to do, it'll be like so much easier. And they didn't necessarily, like, there was no pressure on me knowing what I wanted to do because, like, frankly, when I came home from Rome, I was like, maybe I want to go in the marketing department, sales. Like, I had a marketing new product development class that semester, and I was like, this is really interesting. It's something I feel like I can use my people skills that I have from journalism to really impact people another way. But as soon as I got my internship with NBC Sports Washington, that confirmed like sports media is what I want to do and where I want to make a career for myself for a very long time.
Good for you. So the Redskins, what was your time like? What's it been like with working with them? And I know, their name is going to change here real soon. And
yeah,
how do you feel about that?
Me personally, I think it's probably the right thing that they're doing it, especially in this time. I know whichever decision they make, there's no way to make the entire fan base happy. And there's definitely going to be people who are very upset when they do change the name. But things change, society changes, and I think it's time at this point. We spoke to Brian Mitchell, who does work for us. I spoke to him the other day, and he made a really good point. He said a couple years ago when the Redskins conducted that poll that 9 out of every 10 Native Americans is not offended by the name. That means still 10% of people are offended by the name, and that's still a large population of people offended. So why fight to try and keep a name that offends a lot of people? I mean, me personally, I support the decision that they make. I know it's a tough decision either way, but I think right now they're completely in the off-season transformation of an off-season as well. They fired Bruce Allen, hired well-respected Ron Rivera, got Chase Young, number 2 pick. I believe they're fully investing in Dwayne Haskins, at least for this season. They're going to give him the shot. So you're pretty much you're using this offseason to build a new identity. And I feel like it's almost the perfect time that if you do want to make a rebrand, you do want to make a change, why not now?
Yeah, I can see that. Has there been an interview or an event that's occurred while you've been working with the Redskins it's helped you in your quest in this career field?
I wouldn't say there's one interview that really stands out to me. I would say, honestly, just listening to other people, how they conduct their one-on-one and exclusive interviews is stuff I learned from a lot more. I think like I learned from watching other people do something I want to do. So when I'm in that position, I use the skills I learned by observing others. So I honestly think I learned more from watching other people conduct one-on-ones than I do looking back at my own one-on-one interviews. If that
Any player like any player in particular make you feel like, yeah, you're doing a great job with this, and like kind of put it
Mhm.
out there for you?
I would say, especially over the past couple years, Vernon Davis was always great in the media room. The first time I ever talked to him, I was an intern for the Redskins in 2016. I was actually wearing a University of Maryland polo, so I was like, I was assigned to write a story for Redskins.com that day, and I went up to him. I didn't think I ever introduced myself before because I was just an intern there. He didn't really know who I was. He saw my polo, and we just made small talk for like 2 to 3 minutes before I got to talk to him. And he was great to everyone in the media room. So it's kind of sad to see that he retired. I mean, props to him. He had a great career. But he was great. And then this past year, just talking to like Terry McLaurin, he gives such thoughtful answers, so respectful, gives great like thoughts for every question I ask. So I feel like when I'm talking to Terry, there's not a stupid question I could ask. Like teachers are always like, there's no such thing as a stupid question. There are definitely stupid questions in the media room and wasted questions too, because you only get so much time with each player. So if I get one question, even if I one question at the most, I really don't have the chance to mess it up.
Right.
So at least with Terry, if I asked him a dumb question, because I'm sure I did at some point over the past season, he gave me a thoughtful response that I could use for my personal work. So I thank him for that.
It's wild you talk about Vernon Davis because he and we share a mutual friend, and he speaks so highly of him, and he
Mhm.
knows him, just he really knows him personally to the degree that he would go down to visit him at his grandmother's house when he's
Yeah.
there, and grandma would lay out the food, and Vernon Davis sent him tickets to the Super Bowl, like all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
Like
wow.
he's just that guy. That is so awesome to hear that he was like that with you. It just kind of reaffirms that guys like Vernon Davis, we don't hear very much about. We hear about the guys who put themselves in bad situations or
Yeah.
things of that nature. But a guy like Vernon Davis is the guy we need to talk about more. He's the guy we need to highlight more. And I know there's plenty of guys. There's 16,000 guys or more playing in the NFL. We need to find those guys and
Yeah.
start spreading their stories and get away from some of the other, I
Hmm.
don't know, things that just aren't really relevant in life.
The Redskins, every year that I've been in the locker room, so I guess three, my one intern year, in the past 2 years I've been at NBC Sports Washington, they've had a number of players that were actually really, really good to talk to. Like Jonathan Allen always gives great responses, and he always makes himself available after every game, even if they get blown out, it's rough. He's always there to talk to the media. Same with Adrian Peterson for the most part. And one name that really stood out to me the first year I was there, he's no longer with the team, but Ricky Jean Francois would always talk to the media, and he would like he respected that we had a job to do as well, and he knows he has a job to do too. And when that respect is there from the get go, it makes the working relationship very, very easy and very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. So, from your perspective, how the Redskins doing this draft this year? Is there going to be a guy that surprises us that you know of that they drafted that nobody's
Mhm.
really talking about?
So the nobody that's really talking about is tough for me to answer because I'm so in the Redskin sports media that like nationally, I don't think anyone's talking about anybody besides Chase Young. That'd
Yeah.
be correct, right? So, but within the little Ashburn area, this Redskins media, there's like 3 to 4 guys from the rookie class that I personally believe could make an impact this year. The thing that's really hard to tell is since there's no rookie minicamp, there's no normal offseason OTAs, these rookies are already put at a disadvantage because they don't get to go through a normal offseason
Right.
activities before getting to training camp. Like when you get to training camp, you've had your playbook for months. You've been learning the system. But now that's the first time they're going to meet their new head coach in person. It's the first time they're going to see all the other players. I worry about a guy like Antonio Gandy-Golden, who was the Redskins' fourth-round pick, a wide receiver from Liberty, 6'4", great hands, could potentially be a great complement to Terry McLaurin on the outside. But he played his college football at Liberty, an FBS school that just made the jump 2 years ago. He only played 3 Power 5 schools this past year. One of them was Rutgers. So I definitely believe he has the talent to play, but he doesn't have the experience against these defensive backs at Alabama, LSU, and other Power 5 schools. But to go back to your original question, because I definitely deferred off a little bit, I think Antonio Gibson, the third-round pick, the running back wide receiver hybrid out of Memphis, I think he has an opportunity to make an impact day one. He's really good catching the ball out of the backfield, which is something new offensive coordinator Scott Turner loved to do in Carolina. I mean, of course, he had Christian McCaffrey there.
Yeah.
Not saying that Antonio Gibson is even going to be half of McCaffrey, but that offensive identity just doesn't go away. And this is his first time as a true offensive coordinator. He was promoted for the last 4 games in Carolina last year from quarterbacks coach after Rivera was ironically fired. But this is really his first opportunity as well. And I believe that the success he had by throwing his running backs out of the backfield is something that he can use with Antonio Gibson, who's great in space, can line up in the slot, the backfield. He's really just like a jack of all trades, a weapon that maybe he doesn't have a specific position, but I feel like the Redskins have to find a way to get the ball in his hands.
It's a pass-first league today, and, you open the running game up with the pass, unfortunately. Very few teams are highly run-oriented. It'll be interesting to see how a team like Tennessee does with Derrick Henry, because he had such great success last year, and he's the big guy carrying the ball. But it's a little easier to stop the run, in my opinion, than it is to stop the pass. I mean, you got to trot a nickel, a dime package out there. You need more hybrid guys on the defensive side of the ball now, and the creativity of a guy like Scott Turner. It can be more than the defense can handle at times. So that'll be fun to see how he uses him going forward. Let's talk about free agency. How about Washington and free agency this year? Did they address needs, or do they still have some holes they need to figure out?
So I guess technically the biggest signing that they made was bringing back Kendall Fuller on the 4-year, $40 million deal, which I think it's a good deal. I like Fuller. He immediately comes in and is the most talented cornerback on the roster. I think with free agency, the biggest part of Washington's was they went hard after Amari Cooper, and they offered him more money than Dallas, yet he still went back to the Star, citing that he wants to compete for a Super Bowl. But if you look into it, the $110 million he was going to get from Washington was probably going to end up less money in his pocket than the 100 from Dallas, just due to the taxes and all the stuff in Texas. But the thing that I really liked about the Redskins free agency approach that I don't think was getting enough credit was they didn't spend money on second-tier guys by giving them first-tier money after missing out on the first-tier players. So sure, they missed out on the Amari Cooper, but then they didn't go give a 5-year, $40 million contract to someone like Robbie Anderson, similarly to how they gave a 5-year, $40 million contract to Paul Richardson 2 years ago, and now they just cut him. So in the past, the Redskins have had a knack for signing fringe, really good players to a deal probably worth more than their value, and then them just not panning out. So I commend Rivera and Kyle Smith, who the senior VP of player personnel, for sticking to a plan. They signed a bunch of 1 to 2 year deals for a bunch of players, stress versatility, guys that can play multiple positions. And as they try to form their own legacy in Washington, they have a bunch of guys on prove-it deals. They have Sean Davis from Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal. I'd like to think he was pretty good before he got hurt last year.
He needs to stay healthy. That's his problem. I liked him as a Steeler. He showed plenty of growth the first year. The second year, he was so-so, and then he couldn't stay healthy on the field. And they went out and addressed it with Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and he's a versatile player. If he can stay healthy, he's fast. He can complement Landon Collins. And then they got Ronald Darby on a 1-year deal, who also needs to stay healthy as well. But we saw early in Buffalo, he can be a quality corner. So there's just a bunch of guys that they're given the opportunity to play. They're going to get the chance to start. And both Darby and Davis are DMV guys as well. So they get to play for their hometown team.
Yeah.
So if they're on a 1-year deal for their hometown team, they're going to really be motivated to play well. So I think there's definitely a lot of low-risk, high-reward players in the Redskins free agency, even if they weren't big names, so to say. But that could just be me being optimistic. I'm not entirely sure.
When do you ever see a team like New England or Pittsburgh, per se, go out and sign that big-name guy? They don't have to throw – those teams build from within. Having a good draft and developing those guys, having some continuity in the coaching staff. Of course, there's a little bit of turnover here and there, but that's why Belichick gets his teams back to where they need to be every year, and people need to really recognize that.
Both of those teams.
That and Deflategate, maybe running the camera when you're not supposed to.
I mean, both of those teams do a really good job of finding players that fit their scheme and then go somewhere else and just don't play well, and then they come back. Like you look at Jamie Collins, who did that, and a bunch of other guys who just excel in Pittsburgh, excel in Foxborough, but they go chase the money, and they don't excel in a system that's not as defined, as specific, and as successful. And that's what separates the good teams from the great teams.
Yep. I mean, obviously I'm a Steeler fan. You know that.
Yeah.
You've always known that. But since I was a little kid, the Steelers have had 3 coaches, and there's a reason they've had that success, and that's it right there. So I know we talked about a guy that you liked that they were able to maintain. Anybody else that you would have liked to have seen them keep that walked away?
Honestly, I don't think there's anyone that left the team in free agency that I'm really losing sleep over. I mean, I think the only thing I really would have been disappointed in is if they cut ties with Ryan Kerrigan, which they didn't. He's entering the final year of his deal. We all know about the many investments Washington's made in the front 7, honestly, between defensive line, defensive end. And you can make the case. You take Chase Young this year, Montez Sweat last year, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen in the middle, Matt Ioannidis. Where's the room for Kerrigan? Ron Rivera easily could have cut ties with him. He's 1 year left on his deal, but they're letting him play out. He's 1.5 sacks away from breaking the franchise record, so I know that's important to him.
Absolutely.
So that would have really made me upset. But in terms of players that left, honestly, I think Eric Flowers, he was clowned so much when he got to Washington as this bust who can't play left tackle for the Giants or the Jags. But he was arguably Washington's best and most consistent offensive lineman last year at left guard. He started every game, performed way better than everyone else, and then he was rewarded with a 3-year, $30 million deal in Jacksonville. So this is a guy who was a top 10 pick, scrutinized in New York, almost was out of the league. Washington took a flyer on him, and he changed his career by moving a position over on the line.
One of the things I've often said about NFL players, and maybe some of my listeners will think I'm crazy for this, but, I've been involved in football all my life, not only coaching it, but, being a fan of it, being a student of it, the whole 9 yards. I always feel like a lot of the guys who come out of college are very equal on a plane in terms of their ability. And a lot of the cuts are very difficult for these guys. But I think a lot of the things that it boils down to is, can I coach this guy up to be better than what he might have in terms of raw ability?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened with Eric Flowers. I think whoever your offensive line coach was got out of him what the guy at the Giants wasn't able to get out of him. That in and of itself just shows you that he's a good professional at his job. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Definitely.
So let's go on the notion that 2020 season is going to happen.
Yes.
Look into the future with me. Tell me how you think the Skins will fare this season, or whatever we're going to call them. Are they a playoff team? Are they a 500 team? They still searching for an identity under Ron Rivera? Because I think Ron Rivera is a a spectacular coach. I have all the respect in
Yeah.
the world for him.
So between Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio, I think the defense, there's no excuse for why the amount of talent they have on this defense, there's no excuse for them not to be a top 10 unit this year. And Washington wants to win games by playing good defense and controlling the clock, which is something they excelled in the first 10 weeks of the 2018 season with Alex Smith before he suffered that gruesome leg injury. The Redskins were 6-3 in first place and winning ugly.
Yep.
I believe that may not be the case. They have a young quarterback in Haskins who he's done all the right things this offseason. Maybe he had a lot of rookie growing pains, but he looked good at the end his last 2 games. So I'm more bullish on Haskins than a lot of other people are. So I think he has the potential to be good. For me, I think his first successful season would be doubling the win total from last year. So going from 3 to 6, that's not 6-10. That's not a good year by any standards. But this team was so bad last year, so many holes, and they've had so much turnover. And with this odd off season where it's all Zoom, this, Zoom, that, no in-person activities, it's a lot to ask for a team that's had this much change to really turn that into wins on Sundays. So
Right.
if they can win 6 games, maybe push to 7 or 8, I think that'd be successful because the 2020 season is about building and finding if Haskins is the guy, 1, that's the most important question. And 2, which of these guys, young guys on 1 to 2 year deals are going to be part of the core that they try to build with for the future. So I think when you're looking at, is this a playoff team? I think in 2021, that's the year we should say, okay, maybe they should be contending for a playoff spot. But 2020, based on everything that's happened and the pandemic and all that, I think 6 to 7 wins, that'd be a great season for them.
So is Haskins the answer, QB? Is Alex Smith ever going to come back, and will he push? They picked up Kyle Allen, correct? He's 24 years old. He played under Rivera down in Carolina, so Rivera knows him very well. Is he going to be the guy in the future? I mean, what's going on at that spot? Because that's pretty pivotal.
Yeah.
And Haskins is a DMV guy. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of DMV guys on that team.
When they first traded for Kyle Allen, I was wondering if this was going to be a quarterback competition-esque sort of thing. But from everything that I've heard, and I know 2020 is going to be Dwayne Haskins' job. And Kyle Allen, he has the experience in Scott Turner's system, the experience under Ron Rivera. But he really, really tailed off towards the end of last year. He was actually benched for Will Grier, their third-round pick last year at the end of the season. Grier didn't do any better, but Allen started off really well, and he just really, really stunk at the end of the year. And a lot of people like to point at his numbers and stuff, but he had Christian McCaffrey, he had DJ Moore. Dwayne Haskins was throwing to Terry McLaurin and a bunch of guys that no one outside of the DMV market even knows their name.
Right.
So Haskins was put in a situation last year where his then head coach, Jay Gruden, didn't want him because their timelines didn't match up with Gruden having to win last year. It was the pick, from everything we've heard, came from above Gruden, higher up in the organization. So Haskins, 5 weeks into his rookie season, the coach that didn't want him was fired. And then the guy they replace it wants to run the ball 75% of the time and play an old school game. The first game that Bill Callahan coached for the Redskins, the time of game was 2 hours and 41 minutes. I've never been in a football game that has not lasted 3 hours. And this game lasted 2 hours and 41 minutes. And then Haskins wasn't made the starter until week 9. And he had his growing pains at first. He only started 1 year at Ohio State. He really had like 15 or 16 starts since high school. And now he's making NFL starts. But the last 2 games, they were both losses. Against the Eagles, he probably had his best overall game. I think he threw for like 260 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns. And then the Giants game, he had 2 touchdowns, like 150 yards, and he was completing over 70% of his passes before he got hurt in the third quarter, which ended the season. And this offseason, he's dropped 15 pounds, 20 pounds almost. He's in the best shape of his life. He's been working out with a bunch of receivers, not just Redskins receivers, but Antonio Brown, Devontae Parker, Stephon Diggs, Chad Johnson, even Terrell Owens. So he's really been learning from a lot of good receivers as well. So I'm excited to see what he does. I really think he's taken advantage of the opportunity that he's going to get. And I don't think Ron Rivera or Scott Turner even wants to see Kyle Allen touch the field this year.
You think it was an insurance policy then, just because they're familiar with him?
Definitely, and I also think they knew with this weird offseason, they're going to need someone who knows the system that can step in and play right away. I mean, this is the third offensive system in as many years that Dwayne Haskins has to learn. Yeah. And there are murmurs coming out of Redskins Park that he was struggling with the playbook last year. Not sure if those were true or not, and I personally think he's a bright young man, and I think he can get it done. But there's been questions, and I think Kyle Allen was the safe. And they only gave up a 5th-round pick for him, so it didn't really cost them too much either. So we'll see.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was he at Bullis when you were in high school?
So he graduated 1 year younger than me. Yeah. So he went to Bullis, and he actually committed to Maryland.
I know he committed to Maryland
before flipping to Ohio State.
I had a bunch of people. Well, I'm friends with a bunch of people that are Maryland fans that absolutely went bonkers over it, and I was like, I mean, the kid went to play for what? Urban Meyer then?
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
I don't blame him at all, and
there was a lot of turmoil with Maryland. You didn't know who was coming and going.
So he went on that late night with Coach Loxley's Instagram show that he's been doing during this quarantine time, and he said pretty much once Loxley found out he wasn't going to get retained at Maryland and he was moving on, Haskins knew the new coaching staff, he wasn't going to stay there. I mean, Loxley, even before he was the head coach now, when he was at Maryland the stint before, he played such an instrumental role in recruiting all these DMV guys, all these DeMatha local guys. That was a lot of Loxley in relating to the players. And with him gone and DJ Durkin coming in, Haskins had no personal connection with Durkin.
Right. And
he chose to go play for Ohio State and ended up turning in the best statistical season of any Ohio State quarterback in history. So
I do know that Loxley's a very good recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
He does a great job of laying it out there for the kids, and he does a really good job of doing that. I will say that much. Back in the day when I was coaching, he was in New Mexico, and he came and got a kid from Rockville by the name of Crusoe Gongbe, who played running back for me. Stud athlete, a little bit of great issues, but Loxley got him to come down to New Mexico and play for him there.
Wow.
And he had other kids. He had other kids from the DMV that he recruited down in New Mexico. So that just shows you the level of trust they have in what he brings to the table. And I'm pretty sure he follows up on everything he tells you is going to happen, and that's why he does such a good job at it. We talked about the Redskins name change. It's pretty much inevitable. In all honesty, what would you like to see him change it to? If you were tasked to be the name changer, if Snyder came to you and said, Ethan Cadeaux, $1 million, I need you to take care of this. I need a name, and I need it by tomorrow. What would you call him?
So at first, I was really on board. I thought Warriors would be the really easy switch, but I am totally off that train right now. I think Red Tails, I think there's a really cool story behind that, and I think that would be perfect. I also really like Red Wolves. I talked with Fred Smoot this past weekend, and he put that idea in my head, and I've been on it ever since. I think Red Wolves would give them the opportunity to be creative, could even keep the HTTR if people really care about that. So I think Red Wolves, Red Tails, Red Hawks, it's going to be one of those. But I really like Red Tails and Red Wolves. Those are mine.
You feel it's necessary to have red as part of the name?
I don't think so at all. I mean, Warriors was my first choice. That's what I wanted even back in 2013 when the name change controversy was a big thing back then. But a lot of people are saying, we don't want to be in Golden State's shadow and all that. I think Warriors is also kind of a lazy change because you can keep a lot of the same things as well, but are you really changing everything that it represents? So I'm not entirely sure. I think I'm really open to a bunch of suggestions. I'm not really sold on one, but also the Redskins is all I've known my entire life. So hearing a franchise changing their name, I wasn't alive when the Bullets changed their name to the Wizards. The only thing I remotely know and remember is when the Nationals came to town in 2005 and the other names they were coming up with. But me personally, I've never been through something like this, and it's not going to sound weird, but it's going to sound different. It's going to sound odd regardless of what they switch it to.
It'll take some time. It'll definitely take some time. I've heard some interesting names. I've heard the Monuments, Washington Americans. I don't know if you want to call them an American right now. But I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. I think it's a change that they need. I would agree. During this day and time, I think you do things the right way, and it will be well accepted. And it is a change that they need. Yeah. My last question to you, and I ask every one of my guests this. So you've known that you want to go down the sports, digital media, sports reporter, sports writer path all your life. If that was not the career path you would have taken, what's your other options you might have chosen, or what's one other option you might have chosen?
Definitely think I could, I might even still at some point in my career go into sports marketing, sales, stuff like that. Something where I can use my personality and really connect with other people as well. I would love to do that. I mean, my pipe dream has always been I want to be a sports agent. I know that's a very difficult and hard field to rise to the top to, but I feel like that would be something I really, really could see myself doing. But that also requires 3 years of law school, which I have not done yet.
But you're young. You're young. You can still do it.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to stay in the sports media field for as long as possible, but you don't know. I never know how life's going to turn out. So I could be doing something completely different in 10 to 15 years. But I pretty much think that whatever I do, sports will be involved in some way, shape, or form.
That's perfect. I do a final segment, and it's called Decade Definers. And I'm going to get you involved in this. My Decade Definers is a segment in which I break down individuals or teams from any sport who were the marquee team or player during a specific decades. And I go back to the 1970s, basically back to when I was a little kid. I'm going to get you involved by having you tell me the 5 most impactful Redskins who've been around since, or who've impacted the franchise, let's say, since the 1970s. And even though you may not have been around for some of them, guys who have had a lasting impression on the direction of the Redskins, because they have a storied history, my friend.
Yeah. All right. I think the easiest one to say off the top of my head is Darryl Green. Definitely. Sonny Jurgensen was a little bit before the 70s, but he's probably still the best quarterback in franchise history. I would say recently, since I've been alive, honestly, Sean Taylor probably has the biggest impact of everyone that I've said. I was talking about this with my parents earlier. From the 2010s, from 2010s on, I was going decade by decade. So the most recent past decade, the Redskins are defined by 2 players, Trent Williams and Ryan Kerrigan. Williams was a 7-time Pro Bowler. Kerrigan was 4-time. But when you're talking about the greatest Redskins, neither one of them, maybe Kerrigan comes up just because he's going to break the sacks record, but neither one of them is someone I would say is a decade definer.
Okay.
The decade before, the 2000s, it has to be Sean Taylor or Chris Samuels or Clinton Portis, but the impact that Sean Taylor had and how much the franchise has changed since his tragic passing, I feel like the lasting impact that he's had is untouchable compared to everyone else that actually played. I mean, Santana Moss can make a case as well, but I think Sean Taylor's impact in those 4 years he was here, we still talk about it like it was yesterday, 13 years later. I mean, we just had a podcast from higher-ups at NBC Sports as a whole do a Sean Taylor, the NFL superstar we didn't get to know, sort of thing. So that would be for recent, but to go back, so a lot of the Redskins' storied history is in the 80s and the early 90s. So Darryl Green and then John Riggins for sure. But then you got to look at the Hogs. I mean, you could pick Joe Jacoby, Russ Grimm, one of them. That was the image that I believe people saw of the Redskins, the big offensive line and the running game. All the quarterbacks, Theismann, he was good. He wasn't great. I mean, Doug Williams has an incredible story, but he wasn't a year-to-year starter. So there isn't really a passer in the 70s or the 80s that stands out. I guess you could say Theismann, but I think the impact of the Hogs, Darrell Green, that was a lot more important to me, at least from the history I know.
Yeah, I get it. It's funny you mentioned Darrell Green. Always one of my favorite NFL players, and recently Asante Samuel, who he really should not have a Twitter account. Mm-hmm. What he wrote about Darrell Green being a nickelback and overrated with only 19 interceptions in his career. I mean,
like
guys just former NFL defensive backs, former NFL players just completely went after him. They're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, a lot of cornerbacks these days. I mean, Asante Samuel played like 10 years ago, so he's still in this new era. It's all about picks. But Darrell Green shut down the side of the field. Like, people actually didn't throw to his side.
And he followed the top receiver. He followed the top receiver week in and week out.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's just crazy how, like, cornerbacks talk. No one's ever better than, like, me in my era. It's like, you got to look at the history and see. I don't know where that tweet even came from. Like, someone must have rubbed Asante Samuel the wrong way about Darrell Green that day or something. But
isn't he a Maryland guy, Asante Samuels?
I'm not sure, honestly. If he is, I feel bad by not knowing that. But
I thought he was. Maybe I have him confused with somebody else. Well, it's been great catching up with you.
Thank you. It's been great catching up with you as well.
I really enjoyed it. I love your takes on things. I love your career path. I see a bright future ahead of you. As I've probably been telling you that since 10th grade.
I appreciate it.
And I hope to catch up with you again. Good luck going forward.
Let's do it. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care as well.